After downloading your last name, fluffyclouds.zip, go ahead and unzip it, and then immediately rename that folder with your last name. So in my case, Freeman. Now I'm going to move that to the desktop, but you want to make sure wherever you move that folder that it stays there and you don't move it around on your computer once you start working in After Effects. Double click on it, and we can see in here we have a Photoshop file, we have 2 sound files, and we have the sound credits. Notice in the credits I give a list of the name of the file, who made it, the date, and include the link, and as well as the licensing. So anytime you use sounds that are not provided with an exercise, for example, like this, you want to make sure that you have a text file or an RTF, rich text file, that you submit with your project, which lists every single sound that you use and where it's from, and also the licensing. So use this as a reference for future assignments. Let's go ahead and take a look at that Photoshop file. In here, I have a background layer, which is a photograph. I have a layer that's clouds, and if we click on that to show transform controls, we can see that this is much bigger than the image. That's because we're going to have these clouds move slowly across the screen. So we want to make sure we move it, it doesn't move off the screen so that we have that weird cropping at the edge. Next, there's the windmill stock. There's some clone stamping at the top of the stock. There's the base of the stock, which is a little bit of grass. And then there's the windmill, which will rotate around. Finally, there's the words clouds and the word fluffy. And we're going to animate these so that they pull in together. So for the most part, I can keep a lot of this stuff as it is, but I do want to apply that stock clone stamp to the stock because I don't need to have 2 separate layers for that. And if I bring it into After Effects, it's going to show me clipping masks and all kinds of things, and I really don't need that much information. So I'm going to go to File and save a copy of this so that I have my original image with all that good data, and then I'm going to save a version that's just going to be a little bit pared down specifically for After Effects. So I'll go to File. Oops, I have to make sure I'm in Photoshop. I'll go to File, Save As, Save Computer, and I'm going to save it in the same folder as the other resources and call it Freeman _fluffyclouds.psd. And now I'm just going to merge the stock, the clone stamp at the top of the stock, and then the cloning of the grass at the bottom of the stock. Because actually this stock and that whole background won't move around. I just need to have this in a slightly different layer than the clouds. So I'm going to select those 3 layers, and you can do that by selecting the top one, then holding down the Shift key, selecting the 3rd one, or you can Shift select all 3 one at a time. And then I'm going to merge them. Now using keyboard shortcuts is a really handy way of making things faster. So you can go to Layer and hunt down for Merge Layers, which is Command E, or you can memorize Command E. Now some of these keyboard shortcuts I have memorized, some of them I don't. You can decide which ones help you speed up your processes faster, but I tend to use Command E to merge layers. So Command E, and now it's just called Stock Grass at Base, so I'm going to change that name and just call it Stock. I have the blades, I have the clouds. Now the clouds have effects on it, an outer glow. I'm actually going to leave those because we can work with those directly in After Effects. But now that I have just the layers that I want, I'll go ahead and save this, Command S, and now I'm almost ready to bring it into After Effects. So before I do that, I want to make sure that I organize all my files a little bit better, and you want to make this a habit anytime you're working with files in After Effects. So I'm going to go ahead and make 2 new folders. One of them is going to be Graphics, GFX, and the other one's going to be Sound Effects, SFX. Again, you don't have to do this technically, but getting good at file organization is a big part of professional practice, and so we're going to work at that this semester. Now I'm going to go ahead and put both of these PSD files in that graphics folder. I'm actually only going to use the second one, the one that we've just cleaned up a little bit, but it's important to keep all your graphics together. Next, I'm going to move both those sound files into my sound effects folder. Now this sound credits file, I'm just going to leave on its own. Sometimes if you have a really big complex project, you might realize that you need to make new folders to keep things organized, but for our purposes, we're really only going to have that one, so we can just leave it there in that folder. Now we can go ahead into After Effects and make a new project. And then I'm going to create that project simply by importing in that Photoshop file. Remember, a Photoshop file, if you import it incorrectly, will generate a timeline and a composition. So we're going to go to File, Import File. We'll navigate to that Fluffy Clouds folder. Make sure it's the one with your last name. Then we'll go to Graphics. We'll find the Fluffy Clouds that also starts with your last name. And if you remember what you're supposed to do here, go ahead and do it. And if you don't, remember we change this to composition, retain layer sizes pretty much every time. If we ever don't do that, I'll let you know. And then say Open. And we can really click right through this because this is just confirming that we want to do composition, retain layer sizes. And there's the folder with the layers in it. And again, we don't need to do anything with the folder, it's just there. And then that composition. So if we double click on that composition icon, it'll bring up all those layers and the image in the rest of After Effects. We're really just about ready to get going on this. So let's go ahead and do Command S to save, or you can go to File and Save As. But I'm going to do Command S. Now you'll notice that said Shift Command S. Command S will do the same thing. And we want to make sure we're saving it in the your last name Fluffy Clouds folder, and we're going to save it in this general folder. So call this your last name, you guessed it, Fluffy Clouds. That AEP indicates that this is an After Effects file, and we'll just keep it saved in there.